What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Legitical Response. We cover political news, and we have a whole lot going on in this election cycle. I talked about it yesterday. I am loving this election cycle. RFK freaking drops out, endorses Trump. You couldn't have a better team up in this election, especially. What's really good about this? Okay, so Biden drops out. Kamala Harris comes in, and you see all this enthusiasm, right? And I've explained it away by, okay, so you got a bunch of Democrats. They're looking at the polls. Joe Biden has been down in the polls pretty much forever, right? Ever since, I don't know, it's been a long time. He's pretty much always been down in the polls. It's been kind of competitive, but we do know that there is a bias in these polls, and Trump has been up in the polls. So you got all these people looking at the race going on, looking at this guy who can't hardly talk. He's partially a corpse. He's almost dead, right? He can't walk, he can't speak, blah, 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 blah. His brain doesn't work anymore. It's melted, it's gone. So you got all these Democrats looking at this, and then he drops out, just out of nowhere. He drops out. The Democrat elites say, okay, so, well, he's the president, so let's put the vice president as the top of the ticket. Yeah, let's do that. And the Democrats cheer for it. And that's just so mind-blowing to me, right? You got democracy over here that nobody chooses, right? Nobody chose Kamala Harris, but they're cheering for this. So, okay, let's go with that. You get all this enthusiasm coming in. People are excited. Even Cenk Uygur is excited about this, right? He was vehemently against Joe Biden running against Trump because he knew he was going to lose. Now even Cenk Uygur's excited. Then she picks Tim Walz, and you got all this enthusiasm going on, and the polls start swinging, folks. And now Kamala Harris is blowing Donald Trump away in the polls. However, you look at the sentiment on the ground, and it's not so conclusive. Check this out. Harris Super PAC founder says public polls are too optimistic. Once again, like I said a minute ago, traditionally, polls always favor the Democrats, right? That's why there's a margin of error for these polls. That's what they always throw that caveat in there. Oh, it's a margin of error of like 3% or something like that. So we can always gather that, yeah, it favors Democrats by at least 3%. At least 3%. But if you look in the past, right, look at 2016, for instance, right? Hillary Clinton was really up in the polls. She was smoking Donald Trump, right? 5, 6, 10 points in a lot of polls. But Donald Trump won that election, by the way, by a pretty good bit. Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote, which is weird, but that's just how the Electoral College works. But where it matters, Donald Trump won. So now we're looking at the same thing. Kamala Harris isn't up by nearly as much as Hillary Clinton was. So we're kind of looking at this like, you know, looking at all the enthusiasm, looking at all these polls swing in Kamala Harris's favor, it's kind of demoralizing for Trump supporters, right? You're looking at all this, but don't be demoralized, y'all. Don't be demoralized. We could still win easily. The founder of the main outside spending group backing Kamala Harris's presidential bid says their own opinion polling is less rosy than public polls suggest, and warned that Democrats face much closer races in key states. That's right, in the battleground states, it is within the margin of error on the polling, right? But this is something I want to discuss right quick and get y'all's opinion on this. You hear this all the time, especially, you know, outside of election season. You get all these polls saying, you know, 3/4 of Americans want this, and 3/4 of Americans want this, or 30% of Americans think this way. And I really can't stand that, to be honest with you. I can't stand that at all, because they always do that. They'll say 30% of Americans think this, but that's not true, because they only poll 1,000 people, maybe 10,000 people. You know, I've seen some polls reach up to 20,000 people. So to say 30% of Americans think this way is a lie. These polls are lying. It's 30% of the people that are polled think this way. Now, it's random. I understand that. But that's not really the actual sentiment. It's only what the polling suggests. It's not the actual sentiment on the ground, in other words. So we got to look at these polls as a directional thing, right? Like, okay, so it's looking like this, but it might not be the case. Chauncey McLean, president of Future Forward, a super political action committee, or super PAC, that has raised hundreds of millions of dollars to back Harris in the November 5th election, spoke on Monday during an event hosted by the University of Chicago Institute of Politics. Our numbers are much less rosy than what you're seeing in the public, said McLean, who rarely talks publicly. Harris enters the Democratic National Convention in Chicago riding a wave of public polls that show she has already reshaped a race that strongly favored Republican Donald Trump in the final weeks of President Joe Biden's candidacy. Harris is leading in a compilation of national polls by 538, 46.6 to 43.8 for Republican Donald Trump, and has pulled ahead in several public battleground state polls. Future Forward has created a massive polling operation that created and tested some 500 digital and television ads for Biden and some 200 for Harris. They have talked to some 375,000 Americans in the weeks after Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee on July 22nd. McLean said the group has at least $250 million left to spend planning a wave of advertising from digital to television between Labor Day on September 2nd and Election Day on November 5th. Now, that last paragraph there said they've talked to 375,000 Americans, but they don't say what they said. Now, you would think to conclude that might be the polling. Yeah, but they don't say that. They don't say that at all. They don't say what the hell they talk to these 375,000 people about. Maybe that's their internal polling, but hang on. That's a lot of people, y'all. That's a whole lot of people. And this article doesn't say it. It does not say what those people think. But from the title of the article, yeah, it might not look good for Kamala Harris. Super PACs can raise unlimited sums of money from corporations, unions, associations, and individuals, then spend unlimited amounts to overtly advocate for or against political candidates. And we saw a lot of this with AIPAC ousting Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. That's right, they put in a lot of money to get rid of these people and breaking up the squad in the process, which is a good move because these people are way too progressive, right? The Democrat Party has gone so far left that they've left everybody in the center on the right, right? Everybody, right? Like they call Joe Rogan right wing. He's not right wing. He's not at all, right? They're calling RFK Jr. right wing. He's a Democrat. They're insane, y'all. McLean said the majority of Harris's momentum in the immediate aftermath of Biden dropping out was from young voters of color, and that has opened up Sunbelt states such as Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina states, which Democrats had largely written off in the final days of the Biden campaign. Yes, that is right. She has multiple paths, with 7 states in play, a complete turnaround from when Biden was on the ticket, he said. The other states include Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Yes, these are all key states. Donald Trump is doing pretty good, but once again, Kamala Harris comes in, and the polls are starting to swing. But don't be dissuaded, y'all. I don't think the polls are right, like this person thinks. And this person runs a super PAC for Kamala Harris, for the Democrats. Yeah. McLean said Pennsylvania remains the most consequential state in the group's analysis, and he called the race a coin flip based on its polls. He says Harris must win one of 3 states, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Georgia, to win the White House. He warned that Harris has yet to fully rebuild the Biden coalition of blacks, Hispanics, and young voters that brought him the White House in 2020. McClain said polling shows the public wants more detailed policy positions from Harris. Yes, they do, because she doesn't have any. He says they don't want white papers, but they also don't want platitudes. He says they need more concrete examples of how she may differ from Biden and make their lives easier economically. Trump allies have called on Harris to do the same in recent days, hoping to pin her down on controversial issues. The race is tight as ever, McClain said. We have it tight as a tick, and pretty much across the board, he said. Yes, it is very tight. And yes, Kamala Harris needs to come out with some more policy, right? She for one, she's trying to take Donald Trump's policy, talking about no taxes on tips and being tough on the border. You know what I say to that? What I say to that is, why don't you do that stuff now, right? Kamala Harris could come out, get Congress, for crying out loud, to write up a single subject bill on taxes on tips and get it passed. Just do that outright. Get it passed before November. And guess what? Donald Trump can't do that no more. He can't run on that no more. And you did it. But you know what? You won't do that, because just 2 years ago, you were the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which increased taxes on tips, which increased taxes on everybody, even though Democrats are trying to say, oh, it's going to reduce inflation. But guess what, folks? Their budgets created more of a deficit, which is going to create more inflation. So this is what I tell to Kamala Harris. How are you going to totally just reverse yourself on policy and start doing some smart economic policy instead of all this garbage we've been seeing from the Biden administration? Are you going to do that? How about you suggest that to Joe Biden? How about some smart fiscally responsibility? How about that? But instead, we're just getting platitudes, like the article said. That's all we're getting. Joy and all this other garbage coming from the Kamala Harris campaign. It's ridiculousness coming from these people, right? If they were going to do something in the next 4 years different than the last 4 years, they would have done something different in the last 4 years, right? You don't expect people to just change outright, right? Like all of a sudden their policies are going to start working, y'all. Like, no, I'm sorry. What these people are actually voting for is 4 more years of the last 4 years, right? Just disregard what she's saying that her policies are going to do, because they're not going to do anything different. I'm sorry. You can sit there and tell people everything you want, tell them whatever the hell you want to tell them, but look at their actions. That's what you need to do, Democrat voters, by the way. Look at their actions. They're soft on the border. They're soft on crime. They're soft on the economy. And they're soft on the world, for crying out loud. We've got wars all over the damn place. Right? Donald Trump, no new wars. And what was the reasoning behind that? Right? Like, you just look at that, no new wars. It's kind of a naive take, right? Until you dig a little bit deeper. What was the X factor of Donald Trump as to the reason we had no new wars, right? Like, he says he would end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Huh? Wonder what that means. Don't know. I personally believe that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. Why? What's my evidence for this, you say? Because Putin didn't invade Ukraine under Donald Trump. He waited until Trump came out. That's right. And the reason I think that, just look at history, for crying out loud. It would have been more militarily advantageous for Putin to invade Ukraine in 2015, 2016, after the presidency. He wanted to wait until he saw what was going to happen with the election. And that was a smart move on his part, because if he would have invaded Ukraine under Donald Trump, Lord knows what would have happened, right? He didn't know. That's why he didn't do it. But I think I've rambled on for long enough on this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. Are the polls lying? Or, are they just skewed? Or what's going on with this? Because I don't know anybody that actually supports Kamala Harris for any good reason except she's not Donald Trump. That's all I got for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.